All right, let's talk about romantic relationships in emerging adulthood. Now, I've already talked about Erikson's stage of intimacy versus isolation, which can be applied to trying to find a committed romantic partner. Now, as mentioned in a previous video, or at least one previous video, there have been some changes where emerging adults in the United States at this time in history, they are... they're not abandoning the idea of marriage, but we definitely see delay in marriage, getting married later. The average age of marriage is going up. Interestingly, when the average age of marriage started going up, we saw divorce rates go down. And so of course I can't explain why that correlation exists, but some people have wondered, are people waiting till they are truly emotionally ready for that commitment? Just an interesting little fun fact. And so the thing is, when people talk about like, hey, how are emerging adults these days, how are they carrying out their romantic relationships? Older generations will sometimes rely on stereotypes or what they've heard on, talk news shows and things. They'll be like, oh my gosh, there's no romance anymore. They're just hooking up all over the place. They don't love each other anymore. They're just focused on sex. They're doing the Netflix and chill. Do people still say that? I don't know. I'm old. I probably learned about it way later than everybody else. All right. And so hooking up, where you just have physical sexual activity without a relationship. This could be your one night stand, or the different terms have been applied at different points in history. And then also friends with benefits. We know that term, right? But the idea, again, sexual relationship, but not the committed, emotionally connected, not the emotional intimacy. This is just, we do stuff sometimes. We have fun together sometimes. We're not in a relationship. All right, those are becoming more common. Hooking up and friends with benefit, they are on the rise compared to previous generations. But when we do large-scale studies of emerging adults, we actually find that most are still pretty conventional. Most prefer committed relationships. They engage in something called serial monogamy, where they don't get married to the person, but they're with one person at a time, and that one person is their boyfriend or girlfriend or romantic partner, and they are committed to them at that time, even though they don't enter into a marriage. And so it's pretty conventional, just lacking that marriage certificate. And most emerging adults, they still value the idea of marriage. They still look to it as if, well, I want to get married someday. I want to find the right person, but I'm hoping to find that person and get married. So the behaviors that we kind of think of as stereotypically, we think of these behaviors, hooking up and friends with benefits. We think of that like that's what the emerging adults are doing. Yes, those are more common than in previous generations, but most folks, they're pretty conventional. Now, another thing that has changed is being able to live together without being legally married. Even though recently there was news of one town that made an interesting legal change that they essentially were trying to prevent one thing, but they essentially prevented roommates of people, not trying to make it illegal for people to live together without being married. All right, people live together without being married all the time, and we call them roommates. But a lot of individuals these days engage in cohabitation. Cohabitation, or a lot of people just call it living together. Living with an unrelated person, typically a romantic partner, to whom one is not married. This is becoming more common, and not just in the United States, in other countries too. Let's see. Most young adults in the United States, England, and Northern Europe, especially, Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Norway are very notorious. They cohabit rather than marry before age 25. And then in other countries like Japan, Ireland, and Italy, it is more rare. And Issues with cohabitation. First of all, like there have been legal issues. In some cases, you just could not get away with doing it, and now it's just, except for that one city that I mentioned, it's just easier to do it. And and sometimes there still is a stigma depending on family religion or people's general attitude. Sometimes you'll still have family members referring to it as living in sin or something like that. But it's becoming more common. Now, one thing you might have heard is that people who cohabit before getting married, so these are couples who do eventually get married, but they live together first. Couples who cohabit before getting married are more likely to divorce than those who don't live together before getting married. Is that true? Well, yes, that statistic is there. That statistic has come about in various samples. All right, so we do see this correlation, but you kind of have to do a deeper dive to understand all the data that is available. And so, we do have this meta-analysis. That's a large study combining multiple smaller studies. Meta-analysis does say that cohabitation is correlated, higher likelihood of divorce. But when you look closer and you focus on the couples, and you can actually create kind of like subgroups or subtypes of couples who cohabit, you find that people do it for different reasons and with different aspects of preparation. Some people who cohabit do so because they are doing like a practice marriage. They've already decided, I am committed to this person, I would like to marry this person, but I would like to get used to them first before we are legally tied to each other. I just want to make sure that I want to make sure that we do the difficult stuff first, essentially, getting used to all the quirks about different bedtimes and different preferences for how to stack things on the shelves and all that sort of thing. And then some people cohabit because of hesitation, because they're like, well, I don't know if I want to marry this person. They seem okay, but I don't know if I want to marry them. Well, we can live together, and that way I can get out easily. All right, and so those are different reasons for living with somebody. We do see that some behaviors seem to be particularly important to the divorce correlation. All right, not pooling money, not doing things like having a joint bank account, not sharing in finances, knowing who's spending what and what is going on, not having shared purchases or intention for that, not having close parental relationships, not getting to know the family. Because folks, as someone who's been married for over 20 years, I can definitely say the family members, your in-laws, are definitely very much part of the marriage. It can definitely cause a strain on the marriage if you have unanticipated strains on your in-laws. And so, part of success seems to be, it's not just you two living together. If you're going to get married, get to know those in-laws, get to know the other family members, caring for parental health needs, taking on those duties as your own, seeing yourself as family, and then criminality is correlated there too. I'm not going to try to explain that finding. I mean, not all findings can be explained. Sometimes they're just there and we're like, let's figure out what's up with that one. All right, now, issues with this relationship. Well, first of all, a lot of the research was conducted 10 to 20 years ago. So it may not be applicable today. That's one issue. We might have some cohort differences that are not captured in the earlier research. And then another thing that seems to be particularly important to consider is when people who are cohabitating, how often are they breaking up? Because some people, they live together and they're like, I'm leaving, and then they go back to each other. You can have this thing called churning. Churning seems to be a particular predictor of possible problems. These are where couples, they have broken up and gotten together again with their partner. So leaving and going back, leaving and going back. And some people will do this a lot. Like, oh, you're back with so-and-so. Oh, good to know. All right. All right. So churning correlates with the stormiest relationships, with half of churners fighting both physically and verbally. So if you were going to, if you're going to look at someone's cohabitation relationship, it does seem that one important thing to look at is, well, has there been churning in this relationship? That is particularly predictive of problems. And then the other thing is, if two people they get married after living together, it's like, well, how did they start off this cohabitation plan? Was it just something like, oh, sure, we'll live together, and then you live together for a certain amount of time? Well, we've been living together for a few years. I guess we're supposed to get married now. That's completely different than, okay, I've been wanting to marry you for so many years. I am so certain about you, and now we've lived together and we've shown that we get along. I like your family. I think we are ready. That's a different quality of experience. All right. So how does cohabitation relate to divorce and marriage? It's complicated. All right, be familiar with those studies that I mentioned. And this is going to be the end of the videos for Emerging Adulthood, at least for my lifespan developmental psychology class. And then we get to move on to regular old adulthood. Can't wait, right?